Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and help you to start, finish, and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I'm Mark State. And as always, our show is sponsored by our wonderful Bestseller Academics and patrons. If you want to support this podcast, if you want to keep us on the road, keep all this good stuff coming, come and support us. Go to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. You're going to find dozens of extra episodes that you can only get if you're a patron supporter or if you're in the academy. Most recently, we've done a great episode on AI and ChatGPT. We've had people from Bookouture coming along. We've got some really cool stuff coming up as well. Also, if you want me and Mr. D as your tutors, pop over to the Academy, academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. Amazing stuff there. Courses, a great community, and we've got some absolute superstars in the Academy at the moment. So do check that out. Mr. D, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm still recovering from our incredibly hilarious and brilliant unwelcome spoiler special last week.
Oh, it's good fun. That was so good fun.
It was so much fun. If you missed it, folks, maybe in the show notes, Mark, today you can put in the link.
Yeah,
it's on YouTube. We got a behind the scenes look into how the movie was made, and we had visual effects specialists, we had cinematographer with us, we had actors, obviously a screenwriter as well. It was absolutely brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant, and I was fascinated, and I learned so much about an appreciation of what goes into making these movies, and it's just mind-blowing. So if you've missed it, do go pop along. And if you've got any interest in how things happen, and also how a screenwriter can write one simple line that can create a complete nightmare for months. The production
speciality.
Crew. I know. The power of the pen, guys, is absolutely brilliant. I had no idea. So yeah, do check that out. But we had so much fun, and we had a brilliant coaching session last week where we invited some members of the BXP team and patrons to join us in the Academy for a one-off special. That was brilliant. And so it was lovely to meet loads of people that we've talked to, and we've had messages from on the podcast, but we've never actually met in person. We got to meet a load of people on Zoom last week. So thank you so much if you came. And we'll be doing one again soonish. So if you want to jump on board and get to meet me and Mark, and we can get to meet you and find out about who you are and what you're up to, we'd love to find out that as well. How are you doing, Mark? You've had a busy old week as well. I mean,
very busy. Well, I've got lots of dates for the diary. So I want, and I'll put a link in the show notes so you can check this out. So this is going out on I think the 8th of May. So on the 10th of May, there is a screening of Unwelcome in Margate in Kent, where I'm going to go along, and there'll be a Q&A afterwards. That's brilliant. A place called Olby's Creative Hub in Margate, which will be lots and lots of fun. And then I'm going to be at the MDC Comic-Con in Birchington in Kent on the 21st of May. That is a fantastic event, great fun for all the family. And then I'm going to be at the MCM Comic-Con in London on the 27th of May, and that's going to be a bit like what we had the other night, a spoiler special kind of thing, with members of the cast and crew there talking about how the film was made. So May is absolutely bonkers and chock-a-block, but I'd love to see people, listeners out there, come and say hello. It's going to be really, really good fun.
Brilliant stuff. Now, we have an absolute humdinger of an interview today, so I'm too excited to chat anymore. I want to dive straight into this. So, Mark, tell us about our guest today, Jessie Keane.
Jessie Keane. Well, this year, 2023, sees the publication of Jessie's 17th novel, Never Go Back, which also, 2023, coincides with the 15th anniversary of her debut novel, Dirty Game, hitting the bestseller list. And this is the book that introduced the notorious Carter family to the world. Now, Jessie, she's wonderful. She has Romany heritage, and her Gran, who had the site, had foreseen a writing future after reading her palm at the tender age of 3. And she told us she'd not only write, but she'd be famous for it. Well, she sold 6.5 million copies, each of her books hitting the Sunday Times top 10 bestsellers. I reckon Gran was hitting the nail on the head there. So we discuss living with what she calls a completion complex, being fearless with your writing and your career, and why Jessie waits overnight for the next download.
Oh, this is good stuff, folks. If you need a little bit of motivation, listen to this interview. So let's have a listen in with Mark chatting with the hugely inspiring Jessie Keane.
Jessie Keane, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Absolutely delighted to see you. And it's a very special occasion because this year, well, we're recording this in February. This marks 15 years since your debut novel, Dirty Game. And what's extraordinary, you're a Sunday Times top 10 bestseller. You've sold something like 6.5 million copies. It's just extraordinary. And then you've got a brand new book, Never Go Back. What I'd like to do, we'll talk about Never Go Back, and then we'll talk about your extraordinary career and some of the stories about your how you got where you are today are just amazing. But let's start with Never Go Back. Tell us about Never Go Back.
It's a continuation of Annie Carter's story. Annie Carter has been with me ever since the beginning, really. So it's a double celebration this year, 15 years in the business, and the 7th book of the Annie Carter series. So it's just one of those books that's sort of taken me over for a complete year, and it's gone from her childhood, her husband's childhood, right the way through their lives and all the terrible things that have happened to them. It's a bit of an adventure, yeah. I really had a blast writing it.
Fantastic. And as I understand it, Annie Carter would it be fair to say she's an extreme version of yourself? Is there something about Annie that's a bit special, a bit different to the other characters you write?
I think, yeah, she is very much me. I always say she is me with knobs on, really. She is me to the power of 10. I think like her, she thinks like me. And yeah, that's it. She is me, really.
Fantastic. Tell us about Never Go Back. What sort of trouble has she got herself into this time?
Oh, there's all sorts of problems going on. Somebody's chasing her up the beach, and oh my God, it's very exciting. I sit here in my dull little room typing away, and all these wonderful things are happening, and it's great. But yeah, it's quite there's a real sort of thriller or a ride, and I hope everybody loves it as much as I love writing it.
Fantastic stuff. Well, let's go back to where it all started, because as I said, this is an extraordinary story. First of all, I think you're our first author with Romany heritage on the show as well. So it's a real privilege to talk to you about that, because as I understand it, was it your grandmother insisted that you be born in a traditional gypsy bow-top caravan, so you're true Romany. Tell us about that, and your gran, who made a prediction, didn't she?
She did. Well, she lived in my parents' back garden in her bow-top wagon, came indoors to use the facilities, and then went back out there every day. And she insisted that I be born in there, in that wagon, which I was. And she said when I was 3 years old, she said she's got a double fork on her hand, and it's just down there. And I've got one on that hand and one on that hand.
Right.
Have you got one?
I'm just looking. To be honest, I don't know what I'm looking for, but I'll check later.
She said she's going to be a writer, and she's going to be a really well-known writer too. And of course, everybody laughed because, honestly, I mean, my mother's never read a book, never bothered with a book in her life. So yeah, she said yes, she's going to be a writer. She's going to be well-known. She's going to be famous. And I thought, well, it came true, didn't it? I mean, it happened.
Well, let's talk about that, because sometimes you get people, families, they might say, oh, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a writer, whatever. As a child growing up, did you rebel against that, or did you relish it, and were you writing stories? Did it sort of help point you in the right direction?
I don't think I even paid any attention to it whatsoever. Actually, I did write all the time. Just scribbling little cartoons and making up puppet shows and at primary school. And I won some awards for story writing. I was about 8 years old and kept writing all through my teens. I was doing Star Trek episodes, really exciting stuff. Oh, I love that, Star Trek. And writing westerns. And then I started on romances and just kept going all the time, really. But
right.
Yeah, I used to excel at English and nothing else, really. Art and English, great. I was fabulous at that. Anything else, forget it, really.
And were the teachers encouraging as well when you were at school? Did they recognise your joy for writing?
In the secondary school, yeah, they did start to see there was some sort of talent there. They weren't quite sure what to do with it, but there was a definite talent for writing there. It's strange, really. It's just one of those weird gifts, isn't it? I don't know how it came or where it came, but I'm really grateful it did.
Well, I think it came because you were writing. I mean, we learn by doing when we write, don't we? So,
I suppose so, yeah.
But then it didn't quite all go to plan, did it? Because as I understand it, you wrote, was it 10 romantic fiction novels?
Oh, at least.
What happened to them?
Oh, I think they're in a drawer somewhere, mouldering away. They're not doing very well. But I kept sending them out to people, and I had some near misses with those. I think that's even worse, actually. I nearly got there and didn't quite with those. And then I've been pestering this poor chap, this agent, and I said to him, can you have a look at this script? And it was about the 10th, 12th, 13th script he's looked at for me. And he said, look, don't bother me anymore. Just go away and try a straight crime novel. You're mucking about. You're doing romances. You're doing comedy crime. Try a straight crime novel and see how that goes. And he did me the world's best favour, really, because the minute I started to write that sort of thing, I just found my voice instantly, and it became much easier.
That's fascinating.
He did me a favour, didn't he? Really.
I think he did. I mean, this is the thing. We say don't write to market, but we do think it's a good idea to have a very good, clear idea of your genre. And if you're writing something that's not quite romance or not quite comedy, then it sort of falls between two stools. But you went straight for crime. But that said, your books, there are funny bits in them, there's romantic bits in them. So I guess that finding your voice is blending all those things together. Would that fair to say that?
Yeah. It seems to be, doesn't it? Yeah. But I'm just so grateful to him because he really pointed me in the right direction. I was heading in the wrong one, I think.
Right. Very good. I'll come back to how you found that agent, but I want to go back a step because your upbringing took you to Soho, swinging Soho, and you maybe it was maybe had some encounters with some nefarious people and types, and that's fed into your writing. So are you willing to sort of talk about that and how that influenced you?
I went to Soho when I was really, really young, about 15, 16, and met this fabulous chap. He was he had black hair, blue eyes. He just looked fabulous, and he was very dangerous. He was very sort of edgy. He was, I mean, I was sort of like a minnow swimming about among the sharks in there. I went to the Windmill Theatre and all the jazz clubs, all that sort of thing around there, and just mixing with these people and meeting this chap, this fabulous chap. And I thought someday I've got to put that man in a book. And of course, he is Max Carter.
Right.
That's him. That's him to the life. He's quite cool. Yeah. A bit frightening.
Were you aware of that at the time, or was it just sort of years later that you looked back and thought he'd be perfect?
I think it was years later. Yeah. I think I just stored him away at the back of my brain. And finally, when I went to write Dirty Game, I thought, this is the time. Max is going to be there, and that's the man that's going to play him.
Excellent stuff. Well, let's talk about what kept you going, because you're writing these romance novels. They're going out there. They're getting rejection. They're not getting picked up. What kept you going through all that time? Because it would be very, very easy and understandable for writers to give up at that point and move on to something else. But what is it that kept you going?
I think I'm just too obstinate to give up. Really, I think I'm just it's just too bloody minded. I think I just keep going. I'm relentless. I think it's a failure. I've got a completion complex, and I just go and go and go and go. And like that poor agent, he said, "For goodness sake, go away. Stop pestering me." But, it's just me. That's just me, I'm afraid. Too stupid to give up.
I can relate to that. And being someone who maybe didn't have many contacts in the book or publishing world, did it ever feel alien to you? Did you ever feel like an outsider? How did you find the agent? How did you break in?
Once I'd written Dirty Game, and I wrote it in about 3 months. Once it sort of got straight in my head where I was going with it, it was very quick. And I sent it out to 6 agents. I've never been afraid to send things to agents or publishers. And that's right, I think, because I know a lot of people are terrified of actually sort of making that jump and actually sending it to somebody in the profession. But they're great. They're fine. They're there to help you, really. I mean, you without you, there is nothing. Yeah. They don't have a job. They don't have a function. It's just you, isn't it?
Yeah.
The writer feeding them everything. Anyway, so I sent 6 copies out, and I thought I'm going to get nothing back as usual, but never mind, I've tried. And my partner was saying, get a job, for goodness sake, shape up, do something with yourself, you're wasting your time. And one of these agents came back to me and she said, don't get your hopes up. I might have somebody who's interested, but, don't get panicky about it. It's fine. And she came back over the bank holiday weekend and said, I got you a 3-book deal and it's for a 6-figure sum.
Okay, right.
That was the beginning. That was Dirty Game, the beginning of my writing career. Yeah.
Fantastic. I have to ask, your Gran, who predicted all this, was she still around when this came to be?
No, sadly she wasn't actually. No.
Okay.
It's one of those things, isn't it? It would have been nice if she had been, but no.
But other members of the family were, so, And what was that, again, because sometimes when you get people who get into publishing and book selling and they've got family who have no connection to it, how did they take it? Particularly if you're writing about crime and villains in Soho, were they excited for you, or were they slightly, what's she writing about? Should she be writing about this stuff? How did the family take it?
Yeah, well, I am a bit of a shocker. I always have been when it comes to writing. I just go for it. I go for it, absolutely. I don't get held back by if my auntie's going to read it or somebody. No, I just go for it. That's the only way to do it, really. Just don't worry about anybody else reading it. And a few people were surprised and shocked and saddened, I suppose. But it's just me. And so that, that's the deal. That's what I write. And they're going to have to accept that, really.
Fair enough. I'd like to talk about your writing method, because you said you wrote Dirty Game in 3 months, which is astonishing. What was your routine with that? Were you sort of setting yourself targets every day? What was your daily routine?
I just really rushed at it. I was up in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning in the summer months, just working through to lunchtime, pause for a bit, edit a bit in the afternoon, and then back on it. It was constant. It was sort of pouring through so fast that all this tale of Annie Carter and Max Carter and the gangsters and the villains and what was happening around them, it just took me over, really. So for those 3 months, I hardly surfaced at all, and then just scuttled off to the post office and put it in the post to all these agents, poor things, and off we went.
What do you think it was that unlocked that? The fact that you were able, as you said, it was just sort of flowing through you. What was it that was different about this book to everything you'd written before?
It was, I think it's just the subject matter, isn't it? I think it's just so different to anything I ever did before, and it just suited me so well. It comes naturally to me. I think all this violence and sex and all this sort of thing. Don't seem to have any problem with it at all.
And you're, as I understand it, you're a pantser. You're not plotting ahead. You are just going. And as I understand it, you hit a certain point and you know whether or not you've got a book or not. So tell us about that process.
Well, yeah, I really wish I could plot from start to finish. I've got friends. I've got Peter Lovesey. He talks to me often, and he just says, yeah, I plot everything out religiously, start to finish. Perfect. And then I know where I'm going. If I did that, I'd be bored to death before the end of the first chapter. I really would. I just go with it and just start with the character and start with the sort of scenario. They've got some sort of problem, some sort of conflict. There's always conflict, isn't there, in good books? And I just go with it from there and just carry on and on and on until about 40,000 words. And then I think, yeah, I've got it. I can do something with it. And until that point, I'm really not sure.
Right.
So it's no good my editor asking me, can we have a look at it? Because it's in bits, really. There's nothing there until then.
And have you got to 40,000 words and thought, no, a non-starter, start from scratch?
Very rarely. I think I'd maybe once, but it's not very nice. I tell you, it's quite all that work for nothing. So good.
But looking at the novels that you've published, you got Dirty Game 2008, Black Widow and Jailbird 2009, 2010 two novels, and then it's like a novel a year of 2 in 2020. Yeah. That's an astonishing, level of work there. What was that second novel like? What was Black Widow like? And were there any lessons you took from your debut Dirty Game that you carried over to Black Widow? Was there anything you learned from going through the editing, the copy editing, the proofreading, all that stuff?
Yeah, I learned that it's much more complex than the average person in the street realizes. I mean, I did about 5 drafts in the end on Dirty Game, 5 drafts on Black Widow, and then you've got the copy editing, the line editing. Your editor will have her input as well. So it's much, much more complex than the man or woman in the street realizes. So, yeah, that was quite a learning curve. But, the 2 books a year, that was an absolute killer. That was my then editor said, I want to get your name out there quick. And I said, okay. He said, can you do 2 a year? I said, yeah, sure. Oh, of all the things, all the stupid things to say. I thought, no. But I just about did it. And it was okay. But I would hate to do it again. I really would.
Well, you did sort of do it again in 2020, but with the knock and the manor. But that, I guess, is that lockdown writing or is that?
No, not quite, is it? No, that was before that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? Yeah. So what accounts for that, or are you just on a roll?
I was just on a roll, I think. But I tell you, it doesn't get easier. People say, oh, does it get easier because you've written so many then? It doesn't. It gets harder because you're more aware of the pitfalls. You see where you could go wrong, in the wrong direction, in the wrong character, whatever. It gets a little bit trickier as you go on.
Has you mentioned they're getting up at the crack of dawn in the summer, has that routine evolved over time? Do you has it changed at all? Are you still getting up at the crack of dawn? Are you still writing first thing in the morning?
I will be. As the minute the clocks go forward in March, I'll be up then working on my new one, Dead Heat. And I just always do that. I always work best in the mornings. I don't really like to do too much in the afternoon because it's just not there, It's sort of, it's like a download, isn't it? You get it sort of overnight and then you scribble down a few notes and you think, right, I know where I'm going now. And you do that in the morning, but you've got to wait for the next day for the next lot to come through.
So the next I love that, the next download. So it's like your mind is ticking away while you're asleep, sort of assembling story ideas, and then it delivers it to you and off you go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it does.
Brilliant. I love that. It's terrific. And you mentioned when the clocks go forward for summer. Are you writing in the winter at all, or what are you working on? You still are, yeah, you're nodding there.
Oh, yeah. It's a year-round thing, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, writing in the winter, summer, whenever. Even on holiday.
But you're not getting up at the crack of dawn in the winter then?
No. No, I don't think so. I do work on holiday though. I take the manuscript with me and work on holiday as well. So yeah.
Now, looking back at when you were writing those romance novels, and romance is something that's become big again. It's these things wax and wane. It's come full circle. Do you have any sort of desire to go back and dip into romance again, as it seems to have been your first love, so to speak?
I have absolutely no idea whatsoever. I just could not imagine going back to that, really, because I found it hard and dull, and it just wasn't me,
Right, okay.
It just didn't suit me at all. But I kept trying anyway. Shouldn't have bothered, but I did. I was just relieved to get on to crying instead.
Good. When we talk to authors who have a recurring character, as you've got with Annie Carter, how do you keep that character fresh? How do you keep her, fresh? Do you get excited each time you come back to her? And are you finding it more difficult or less difficult to come up with challenges for her?
I think it's just rolling away in the back of my mind all the time with Annie Carter. It's I really do love to come back to her, and it's nice when you do a standalone and you can just relax and look at a new family and think, oh yeah, well, I can do that, this and the other with them. But to go back to Annie is something really special, and I think I've got another one on the go with her as well. So yeah, I think she'll be back again.
Right. Is that when you say you think, where are these? How do these first inklings of an idea come about? When you say you think, are you jotting down ideas yet, or are you still waiting for a download on that one?
I'm still waiting for the download, really. It will come. But there's little bits sort of seeping through at the moment, yeah.
Brilliant stuff. And 15 years, amazing achievement, incredible sales. Readers love you. Could you ever have imagined this, looking back? And is there anything you go back to young Jessie when she's starting out? Is there any advice that you'd give her ahead of the publication of Dirty Game?
I think it's be obstinate, be stubborn, be relentless, just push at everything. You just go at it. Don't take no for an answer. I think that's good advice for any writer or would-be writer. Just go for it. Don't be afraid of publishers, agents. They're only human beings. They're fine. Just push ahead. Go for it. Don't hang back, because you'll never know, will you? If you don't try, if you don't go for it, you won't know.
Yeah, I love it. That's terrific advice. What's coming next from you, Jessie? I know you mentioned, maybe a new Annie Carter story, but what's next on the agenda?
I'm writing a standalone at the moment, Dead Heat, and that's about there's a horrible murder and a new family and a load of villains. So yeah, I'm quite enjoying that one at the moment. That's good. Excellent
stuff. Well, Jessie, huge congratulations, not only on Never Go Back, but on 15 amazing years of delighting readers. And here's to many, many more. And thanks for speaking to us today, and hope to speak to you again really soon.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. Oh, I wish I had a Gran like Jessie, Mark. She could have saved me so much grief in my life. Imagine we all had Jessie's Gran. It'd be like, this is what you're going to do, love. And you just, but isn't, you know that everyone who knows me on this podcast knows that I love all this stuff. And, I do wonder how much of, when you get someone who believes in something, it's like when you get that teacher who believes in you, and that's the thing, how much of, like Jessie's Gran, she sounds like an amazing character. Like how much of what she said actually, became that self-fulfilling prophecy. She might have seen it in the tea leaves or whatever it was that she was, foreseeing. But I'm just wondering how much of that helped her get to the success that she's had today. It's quite incredible.
Absolutely. No matter what you believe, if it's a supernatural thing or if it's just that thing of, we've spoken about this so many times, where someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "You're good at this. Keep going." Yeah. And that is all a writer needs sometimes, because we live in doubt so much of the time. Is this any good? Should I be doing this? Am I completely wasting my time? What should I be doing with my life? And if someone says to you, no, you're good at this, stick with it, kid, keep at it. Yeah. Then, and you see that she wrote 10 romantic novels that, she said no one wanted, but they're all near misses, which in some ways is worse, nearly getting there rather than actually, but she learned from that. She kept going, and no doubt had her Gran's voice, speaking to her with every rejection or whatever. That's what she, picked herself up, dusted herself off, and off she went again.
Well, we've talked so many times about this idea of, and I think the word of the week is relentlessness. I mean, to keep on going, and it's proof. Jessie is yet another, and we could make a tour shirt now, couldn't we, of all these writers that we've met who have these stories of rejection, of finding their way, finding their voice, keeping on going, and then bang, something happens. And she is the epitome of relentlessness. She kept on going. But here's the other thing that I love about listening to Jessie and how her whole approach to life is. She has this sense of almost no fear. I mean, she talked about never giving up. She used a lot of words like, don't be afraid of sending your manuscript. Don't be afraid. Like, it wasn't like, but she's really hitting the nail on the head. The reason why people don't do it is they're scared of getting rejection, or they're scared that it won't be good enough, or they're scared that they're not ready to send it. But her thing is like, it doesn't matter. Just don't be afraid. And then she said this brilliant line, without you, there's nothing. The agents don't have a job without the writers. We do it. We're part of the whole picture here. And without us as writers, publishers wouldn't exist. So I love that attitude where she's like, all power to writers, go for it.
Learning to value yourself and what you do is one of the most important things you can do as a writer. And we are recording this on the day that the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, the Screenwriters Guild in America, has just said we're on strike because we are being undervalued. So it's learning to value yourself and what you do, that it has an importance, that it has a value, is because we are part of what we do. This act of creation, this is where I get really pompous, this thing that we do, it's a massive ego trip, but it's also very humiliating as well. You're balancing two kind of opposites there. You are saying, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to create a whole world and put people in it, and I'm going to put them through hell. I'm going to be like a demigod, and I'm going to play with their lives and toy with them and wrap it all up in a bow at the end without an ending. So yeah, watch me. But you've also got to expose your kind of inner self and all your fears, and you're committing it to paper in a way that is pretty blooming permanent, and then putting it out in public so people can point at it and go, oh, what a load of rubbish, so it's such a weird thing that we do, that we have this massive egotistical declaration that we're going to put stories out there in the world, and then kind of put our poor mental health completely through the ringer at the same time. But Jessie, I mean, like you say, talk about fearless. That is a woman, I've no doubt, if there was like a fire, she'd be the first one to roll her sleeves up and run into the building and rescue people. She's not scared of anything, that woman.
Yeah, and I think for some people, the kind of journey isn't so much, fulfilling some ego need. It's for some people, I think it's more of the personal challenge. I think a lot of people going through their first novel, I think a lot of it's about a personal challenge of proving to themselves that they can do it. And that can give people, I think a lot of writers I meet are so humble in the sense that they don't believe in themselves, and unfortunately they become so humble that they hide their light under a bushel, and they don't ever put their stuff out there because they think, well, I'll never be good enough. And it's those people I want to reach out today and say, you just never know. You've got to go out there. If you're able to break through and have Jessie's attitude towards things, and what's the worst that can happen? Just go for it, and allow yourself to put yourself out there so that other people can validate how good you are. Because I think a lot of people don't believe in themselves. And I think it is a pandemic in the world. It's a crisis in writing specifically. It just sometimes people they're on a journey of discovery, and I think once they've completed that first novel and the confidence starts to build, then it builds and grows and the momentum starts. But that first novel can be such a challenge.
That question, what's the worst that can happen? Let's answer that now. Because it's happened, I think every published writer, the worst has happened to them, which is the worst that can happen is that your book goes out there and it doesn't sell, or that no one reads it, or that you get stinky reviews, and it's a bit humiliating. That's it. That is the worst that can happen.
And for that book as well, let's not talk about a career. That's for that one book.
One book.
Right? One book. Yeah. That's it. I mean, it's a big deal, but it's still one book. It's not your life and your writing.
And it's happened to a lot of writers, and it will continue to happen to a lot of writers. But you're right. That is one book. So what you do, you learn from that experience, you dust yourself off, you figure it out, you move on. We got someone coming on in a couple of weeks who, they self-published a novel and it didn't do anything, and they could have given up there and then. But they didn't. They picked themselves up, they kept going, they did something new, and they're a success now.
Here's a question for everyone out there. Regardless of how successful your first book, if you finished a book and you put it out there, regardless of how successful it was, would you ever say that you regretted writing that book? Even if you've only sold one copy, I bet you there are very few people in the world that would turn around and say, you know what? The book didn't fly off the shelves. It was a complete waste of time. I wish I'd never written it. Because I think most people, the act of writing a book is a huge reward in itself. And to just take that away from, I mean, selling the books in some way is great, brilliant. It's a bonus. It encourages you to keep going and keep building and building. But I've never heard anyone ever say to me, I spent 6 months or a year or 2 years writing this book. It was a complete waste of time. Because everyone knows that they're learning all the way through that process. And so that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a pursuit of growth, of a pursuit of like, how far can you push yourself? What are you capable of as a human being? What can you create? And you always end up in the positive, because all the stuff that you've learned through that journey, there are so few ways you can do that in life, aren't there, Mark? I mean, when we sit back and look at yes, I think another great example would be an athlete, somebody who wants to run a marathon, someone who wants to just run 5K. They're running it because they get the benefit of getting healthy and fitter doing it, but it's the proving to themselves that they can do it. People don't finish a marathon and go, well, that was a complete waste of time. Why did I bother training for that? It's like, I just ran around London for 26 miles. What was the point? No one ever says that. They come with massive smiles. Like, you just look at the videos of book openings, like the beaming, smiling, like, I've got they haven't put it even out into the market yet. And it's just, I've got that. But it's about the journey. And then the fact that we even get to play in this space of trying to sell it, build a career, that's like funfair, isn't it? That's the magic beyond, that's your whatever. I mean, anyway, we could talk about this forever, but the point is, it's about the journey. And Jessie's proof of that, but when you have the right attitude with the journey, when you can break through and you can grow through your, the things that hold you back, then you can be like Jessie. Then you can sell 6 million books, because that's how it works. It's how it works.
So let's overshare. So what's your worst experience? I'll give you a minute to think about it. What's your worst experience, say, as a musician or as an artist or a creative of any kind? What's the worst that's happened to you? Because for me, I did a play where one person showed up and there were 4 of us in the cast. And that was pretty low, because, you've gone to all this effort. You've been rehearsing for weeks. You've been going around to rehearsal halls and you're writing it, and people working the lighting and the sound. And then one person showed up. So that was a pretty humiliating one. Or there was the one where I was in a play. All of these are plays. I was in a play where we had a band in the play and someone sat in the front row with their fingers in their ears. That was a pretty low moment. Or my favourite one was when Claire and I did a production of Frankie and Johnny and the Claire de Lune, which became the movie Frankie and Johnny. Now, the play is a bit different to the film in that it opens with the couple having sex, right? So they're in bed, they're under the sheets, they're having sex. And again, for that night, one person showed up.
So it was
my mum.
Oh, no, sorry, I didn't mean that. Oh, my gosh.
Wait ever in a punchline.
Worse. Yeah, always wait for the punchline. Oh, that's awful. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah. And then when the play finished, Mum sat there and clapped. I said, you could at least give us a standing ovation. So...
Did she chuck a condom on stage? That's what I know. That would have been pretty. That would have been a mum thing to have done.
Yeah.
In the
be
front
careful,
row.
Mark. Be careful.
I hope you've got protection, son. Oh my gosh. Oh.
So having been through that,
nothing else
can be
compares.
Worse.
I know.
Nothing can be worse.
In fact, actually, that's why we need to have those moments, because you've got to have that moment where you say those beautiful words. Do you know what though? Could be worse.
Yeah, it could be worse.
Let me tell you about the time.
I've just thought of another one actually.
Go on.
It was the London. Oh God, I can't remember what I'm going to say this. This was the London Film Festival premiere of Robot Overlords, and it went down really, really well. Full house, lots of applause, lots of kids in the audience really enjoyed it. There's me, the cast and crew. We're standing up on stage, and they had a Q&A afterwards. Any questions? And the first person to put their hand up was a person that I didn't know very well, but he knew my aunt, and he had worked in film, and he worked with people like David Lean, and he was this crusty old fella. And he put his hand up. And you know how you have a little moment where you just think, this isn't going to go well. I don't know why, but this just, your spine turns to jelly. And as I saw the person with the microphone going over, I thought, no, don't give it to him. Don't give it to him. But they gave it to him. And his first question was, I can't understand why the BFI gave all this money for this rubbish. And he started laying into the film. It was the first question. And I'm standing next to Tamer Hassan, who's a handy fella. Tamer's a big fella, and he looked like he was going to kill him.
Oh my gosh.
And I'd invited him. So, I spoke to him afterwards. I said, well, what were you thinking? I said, I've done that before. I said, just a bit of lighthearted fun. I said, no. I said, I could kill you. So anyway, that was a pretty humiliating experience as well. But
Worst one for me, Mark.
Go on then.
Okay, I'm going to have to mention the G word.
Hey,
for those have you got
your,
week? Actually, do you know what?
It's been a while.
It got name dropped. Glastonbury got named at the unwelcome spoiler, and I didn't actually say it. They even referenced it wasn't me. It was honest God. No, ongoing joke, folks. If you're new to the podcast, you have to listen back. But the very first time we played Glastonbury, as everyone well knows, Glastonbury does tend to rain a little bit. The night before we got there Thursday, we were performing Friday evening. So we had a really prime slot, and the heavens opened, and they didn't stop for it'd been raining all week. Coldplay couldn't get their stuff to the pyramid stage. They were literally their articulated lorry was stuck. They had to literally they had tractors, and they were I'm not kidding you. They were unloading this articulated lorry with all their set on it, all the stage and everything, and they were bringing it to the stage on tractors because that's the only thing that could get through the mud. Now, for anyone who's read Back to Reality, there is a scene late when we get to Glastonbury in the book. Spoiler alert! There's a whole scene around porta cabins, porta potties or portaloos. That was actually based on a real life experience that I had because the porta potties actually started overflowing. So when we were crossing the divide, as it wasn't there before, but overnight, but the divide happened. There was a river. It was the year Banksy was actually there, and I don't know if you remember that he put little shark fins in the water. It was so much water. But anyway, we're crossing the divide. What the divide actually was it was a mixture of the rain and all of the sewage that had come out of all that. It was utterly disgusting. Anyway, to cut a long story short, overnight, the place where we were playing collected water on top of the roof, and it split. And all of the water came down on all of the sound system, and there was water everywhere. Yeah. And we got wind at about 11 o'clock that morning that they were having to come in with huge trucks to suck the water out because it was all waterlogged and the equipment having to replace equipment, and it didn't stop raining as well. So our first ever gig at Glastonbury was actually cancelled.
Oh,
we got all the way there, but long story short, we got to play it 3 times in the year, and partly because we got cancelled the first time, we then got to play it the next year. But It was a nightmare, absolute nightmare. I mean, worst thing ever, like biggest moment of your music career.
Yeah, dreams
and the rain
kind of dashed.
The rain,
I can imagine.
rain cancel play. But anyway, so it happens. Wow. But you're right. I mean, every single time after that, it's like, well, what could be worse? You know, we and they always say when you have a really low point in anything that you do in life, that becomes your reference point in the future. If you ever have another low point, you always look back and say, I managed to get out of that one, so I can get out of this one. And it gives you the strength to keep going. And that, folks, is the blessing in all of it. Like, it's the fact that you got that reference point. You think, wow, you know, I did that. And I think that's a really, really, you know, it's so important for writers, because a lot of us writers are very fragile people. We're very fragile.
Indeed.
You know, beings, our emotions get hurt and we're putting ourselves out there. So brilliant stuff. But listen, folks, we've got a lot more to talk about, but we're going to be doing an extended for everyone who's supporting the podcast on Patreon, all our academics. We're going to talk about people that you meet in life that years later become characters in your book. We're also going to talk about how much of yourself do you put of yourself in your book, especially when you're looking at being the protagonist, for example. And we're also going to look into how this state of flow can happen. And I'm sure everyone listening to this right now has experienced it on some degree or other. So when you get in that flow, what should you do when your book just starts to flow and it all starts to come out beautifully? And we're also going to deep dive a bit on this idea of the download, because it's something that Mark and I have also experienced. And I'm wondering if you've experienced in your life as well. So if you have, pop along to the extended edition. You can do it by going to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. And not only will be helping the podcast, but you'll be getting a ton of extra goodies from Mark and I. So welcome, folks, to the extended edition. Let's dive straight in. Mark, people that you meet in life. I love this idea that Jessie was, a lot of her main characters, including herself, actually, became massive inspiration for her book. And it's kind of interesting because you never quite know when you're going to meet those people randomly in life that could become a central and a huge part to the success of your book.
Yeah, it's this thing of having your sort of character radar on as well. Finally, Claire and I were just this weekend. We were in the New Forest, which is a beautiful part of the country.
New Forest, yeah.
And there are wild ponies everywhere, and it's great. And we thought we were on our way to an event at Bewley, the country home there. But we pulled over and said, It was the morning, the sun was coming up. Let's pull over and have a look at the horses. So we had a look at the horses, and there was the roads there, it's like the surface of the moon. We're like bouncy, 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 bouncy. So there you go, my shock absorbers kind of thing, you know. But we parked and had a walk around, and we noticed there was an area reserved for the Model Remote Control Aircraft Club. Okay, so there's a bunch of all blokes with their little biplanes and little Piper planes, and doing little loop the loops, and it was great. And I loved this stuff, and we were sitting there watching that. It was great. And then we heard this kind of, and this car came up behind us. Right, so this was a bright orange Audi. It had a personalised number plate, and it nearly ran us over. So we thought, so immediately we're kind of watching this, and it ticks so many boxes. And I looked at Claire and I said, that's a character. That's a character. We know. And I won't say what the personalized number plate was, a name, a bloke's name. So we won't say what it is. But as we were walking back to the car, there was a new addition to the aircraft, and it wasn't a biplane, and it wasn't a little Piper plane or anything. It was like a Eurojet fighter, the Typhoon kind of Eurofighter thing. And I said, that's his car. That's his plane.
That's his
the guy with the orange car. That's his plane. And immediately there's a character. You've got these three little points, and that is filed away. Whether I use it or Claire will use it, I think Claire's more likely to use it in her book because she writes contemporary stuff. That's filed away. But also just people that you meet in life who are just a little bit extreme. And there's a part of you thinking, will people believe that that's real? Will people believe? Now, Jessie's dealing with people in Soho, nefarious types, people who live on the edge, who, a little bit way, a little bit whoa kind of thing, Yeah,
she was 15 when she went. I mean, in the middle of all that, that's bonkers.
Yeah,
when you think about it.
Yeah. So, that is a rogues gallery and a half, and it's just fantastic. So I carry a notebook with me everywhere. I've got my phone with me to make notes. If I ever hear anything or see a character like that, that gets written down straight away. That gets filed away straight away.
And I think the interesting thing is I noticed that only happened to me when I started to write. Like it's almost like your radar's open once you start to write, and then you start seeing the world full of like potential characters. Whereas in the past, you'll have met some really interesting characters, but you'll never have made that connection. So here's my challenge to everyone listening to this. Pause the podcast right now and write down 5 characters that you've met in your past life before maybe you started writing that would make the most amazing characters in your book. Because we often sit there thinking, oh, I've got to come up with a character and writing all these make-believe things about this character, where there's probably someone that you in your childhood, or a teacher that you had, or some character you met on a bus when you were traveling, whatever it might be, who's actually just sitting there waiting to be picked and become that character. And then because you've met that person, you may have known that person, you don't have to like sit and dream up a character Bible. It's all there because you may know a bit about their backstory. And so if you weren't writing, like how many characters did we meet that we've let slip but are still there waiting in the wings? So that's a challenge for everyone. And if you do use a character, let me know, because I'd be kind of curious to know how that came about.
And don't worry about them recognizing themselves, because it's very unusual that people recognize themselves in fiction. Now, what you can't do, I mean, you remember we had our episode with our entertainment lawyers.
Oh, yes.
And, you can't, if you start using famous people in novels, it's a slightly dodgy area. I'll put a link in the show notes. You can hear our conversation about that. And, obviously change the names, don't use the same name. But, what I find is I usually take an element from one person and an element from another person, blend them together, and then you've got something completely unique. And don't worry too much about the weird specificity, the thing that they might do, the thing, the fact that they might do something strange that you think is so out there. What you will find is people out there will have seen that odd behavior themselves and go, yeah, I recognize that. I totally recognize that. So blend those characters together.
It's a Mr. Potato Head, isn't it? Do you ever play Mr. Potato Head? It's a bit like that, isn't it? It's your Mr. Potato Head character, right? That's all you have to do. Now, let's talk about how much of yourself that you should put in your book. This was really interesting, wasn't it? Jessie saying that she was often writing an extreme version of herself.
She said, Annie is me with knobs on to the power of 10, which is great.
What's your take on how much of yourself you put in your book?
Well, I think if you're not putting yourself in the book, then why are you even writing the book? I think everything in the book is seen through the filter of you. That doesn't mean you have to be your protagonist or your antagonist or any of the characters. And I know people worry about this, because if you put a character in a book who's, maybe a misogynist or homophobic or a racist, and you think, oh, I don't want people to think that I'm like that. But you will have seen these characters out there, and if you're going to reflect what society is like, then you need to, you might have occasions where you need to put these people in your books, and that is understood. But I think you can't help but put a little bit of yourself in all of your characters, because that's your humanity. That's who you are. So in my books, there's always a big chunk of me in there, but it gets filtered through these other characters.
And it's different elements. It might be that you're spread out over a number of different characters, and each character's got one or two elements of things that you know about yourself. And I think that's a very interesting way of writing. And again, nobody knows. Only you know all of those elements. And unless this is the key thing, unless you actually spell it out in an interview, when you say, oh yeah, well, that part of that character is me, and that, then nobody knows. It's a bit like the actor in the theatre forgetting their lines. As long as you don't go, oh, sorry, I've just forgot my line. Nobody knows that line was missing. Yeah. And so it's to reverse that. You've got to know that it's in your head, and you can be safe. It's like locked away in a treasure trove. And unless you tell people, then people won't realize. So your secret's safe with us ultimately, isn't it? In the characters.
Absolutely. And I think that also feeds through to your prose style as well, not just the characters that you write. I think one of the greatest compliments you can get as a writer is when people say, oh, you write just how you speak. Then I think that's the thing of finding your voice. And as Jessie said, she'd been writing romance and it hadn't quite worked. And then she said, as soon as she started writing crime, she said, I found my voice immediately. And that was her thing. She discovered her thing, and she went with the flow, So I think that was great. Now, the downside of putting too much of yourself in a character, particularly if you're just starting out, is you can probably be too kind on that character and not test them and not challenge them and not be cruel to them. And I think you need to be, I've said this before, you need to be like an Old Testament God to your characters. You need to test them and torture them, make their lives an absolute misery. The other downside is you get what's called a Mary Sue, which is a character that's just too perfect to be good. It comes from fan fiction. I think it was Star Trek fan fiction, where a lot of women were writing fan fiction about characters on the Enterprise that just fell in love with Captain Kirk and were just too good to be true, and it became this thing. There were a Gary Stu and a Marty Stu who they became these characters that were just good at everything, and it's like, well, why are we reading this?
Well,
what's their flaw? What's their conflict?
Exactly. Yeah, I think actually, I do wonder. Having talked through this, I do wonder whether one of the most powerful ways to put yourself into your characters is to be truthful to yourself about what your fatal flaws are.
Oh, yeah.
And then split them up over a few characters or your protagonist, and use the opportunity to write them out and work through them. Because I think writing is therapy on so many levels,
completely.
right?
Completely.
So here's the thing, right? Why not just put them out there and be honest with yourself and go, yeah, this is mono. And it could be that the character's really doesn't believe in themselves. If that's a lot of writers feel that, then that's a fatal flaw for any superhero or protagonist.
We were talking about the Unwelcome Spoiler Special, and someone said, why is oh God, I've forgotten the character's name. Douglas Booth's character. Why is he so hopeless? Jamie, that's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm getting old. He said, why is Jamie so useless? And I said, that's because he's a version of me and John. He's like the worst version of me and John. We think we could be hard, but we're not hard. And when push comes to shove, we probably curl into a ball and cry. We were saying that's kind of the word. We've tested that character and prodded and pushed and jabbed them until they're on their knees begging for mercy. So yeah, that is a very, very personal character,
Definitely.
So yeah.
I love it. Oh, so much to talk about and explore. I wish we had like 6 hours where we could because we could literally, me and you, we could riff on that one point for the rest of the day, couldn't we? I mean, we could explore it.
Therapy.
Yeah, it's like it's the bestseller experiment counselling session. Let's talk about this sense of flow, because Jessie talked at quite some length about how the pace. She talked about the pace of the book that she wrote. She wrote this book in 3 months, but from what I was hearing, it was like the pace of the book was mirrored by how quickly she wrote it. I suddenly wondered, if a book takes forever to write, does the pacing in the book mirror that? Right? If you can bash a book out like Shannon Mayer bashes a book out in a month, and that's kind of insane. But I wonder if that's how she gets the pacing in a book, because she's pushing it really hard. How much of that do you think is true, or do you think there's a value to taking your time? Because you just bashed out a manuscript in 50,000 words in April, didn't you? Which was pretty insane.
I did 50,000 words by accident in April. I did NaNoWriMo, whatever it is.
Without even realising it.
Just using, folks, the 200 words a day method.
Wow.
But that's because I'm in first draft flow.
But that's amazing. 50,000 words in a month. I know you are quite a prolific writer, but that's a good month for you, isn't it?
I've been hitting sort of 30, 35 every month, but this is, like I say, this is first draft. But what I'm doing is like, Wallace and Gromit, The Wrong Trousers at the end, where he's laying out the track in front of the train.
Yeah.
So I'm writing something, and then I'm going, what's going to happen next? So I'm writing lots of notes, and it's very kind of, free form. What's the worst thing that could happen? Blah, blah, blah. And I make a whole bunch of notes, and then I turn that into what happens next.
Okay.
So of those 50,000 words, I would say 18,000 of those ended up in the novel.
So in a way, your 18,000 is kind of almost like your second draft of what you were.
It's really quite solid. It feels really, really solid, and this really, really works for me. So
that's fantastic.
That's the kind of the flow that I'm in. And funnily, I interviewed someone this morning, an author called Damien Dibben, and the show isn't going to be on till September, maybe even October, because we're front loading so I can take the summer off. But we're Damien Tibbett, and he was talking about how writing first thing in the morning is a bit like when you go into the sea. Okay, you know, when you go, so you can be kind of and sort of dip your toe in a little bit, but once you're in the water, it's fine. Yeah. And he said there are some people, you know, there are some people who just rush into the. And I think Jessie is one of those people who goes, he rushes into the water, splashes in, is up to their neck immediately, and is swimming straight away. So I think that's and yes, I think that does affect. I don't know if it affects the actual pace of the story, because I think writing a novel with nothing but breakneck pace is just going to exhaust the reader. I think you need light and shade. But in terms of getting that first draft down, that really does help. And I think that's where I am at the moment. And it is that thing of, you know, you feel like after a good swim, you know, you come out and you feel euphoric.
Completely. I think with Jessie, she was saying that, like, she felt like she didn't resurface for 3 months. And I think if you have that luxury of being able to just get your head down and push through that, and you're in the flow, then goodness me, just go for it. Because I think the value of what you will get out of that intensive period is incredibly powerful. I mean, but it's only when the stars really align and your life is able to do that, which is, again, a lot of people aren't able to do that day to day.
But that flow thing leads to what we're going to talk about next, which is the download.
The download, absolutely. Now, the download is something I've heard that term before, and I know we'll talk about this. I've experienced this on an incredibly personal level throughout my whole life. I'll wake up in the middle of the night at 3:00 in the morning, usually 3:30. And something will be fully formed in my head, and I literally have to turn on my light. I have a notepad by my bed, because this happens to me a lot, and I will write out everything I can remember. And sometimes I'm up for an hour just capturing and getting it down, because I know by the time, you know, dawn comes, it'll have gone. And you've experienced this as well, haven't you?
Yeah, well, Jessie was saying that her days, she was writing at 5 a.m. to lunchtime, editing, and then back on it. But then overnight, she trusted her mind to arrange all her disparate thoughts into something cohesive that she could start writing the next day. And that's what happens to me. I've trained myself, I guess. The last thing I think before I go to... Yeah, maybe.
Because it's a download, right? Well, I think about computer analogies. You can program your mind to do this, I think, in your subconscious.
And I do start thinking, okay, tomorrow I'm writing about X, Y, Z. Okay, brain, go for it. And then I'll let it... There's a lovely scene in The Simpsons where Ralph, the cop's son, Ralph, he says he has to go to sleep. He says, "Oh, sleep, that's when I'm a Viking." And I kind of, that goes through my head before I go to sleep every night. I think, sleep, that's where I do story work. And then when I wake up in the morning, I sort of know what I'm going to be writing.
Honestly, I believe there's something in this. I believe that you can. I mean, a great computer analogy. It's just like we're all the programmers of our imagination and our brain. And if we start to take control of that, and we believe, even if we just believe we can do that, before you go to sleep, what's the biggest, everyone try this tonight. Write down one line. What is your biggest challenge right now? What is the next thing that you want to happen in your story? Or what is it you're stuck with? And literally, like, it's like Chat GTP. Instead of like trying to think of the solution, just ask the question. Write the question down. What should happen next to this character? What should happen in the next part of the book? I'm stuck with this scene. How do I resolve it? Ask the question, write it down so it's out of your head. That's very, very important. You can't leave it whirring in your head. Write it down, put it out there, get a decent night's sleep, and make a note as to whether when you woke up the next morning, you either had an inkling or, as I sometimes experience, a fully formed answer. And it's like ChatGTP, like literally type it in. I mean, AI is great because you get the answer straight away, but like your brain, your subconscious of your brain is like doing 97% of all of the magic that we don't even fully understand. And if you tap into that, it's like, it is the world, our brains are the world's most powerful computer. There is not a computer out there right now that has billions, the equivalent of the billions of synapses that fire in our brains every second. And if we decide to tap into that and we believe in this incredible power, then we're actually just starting to scratch the surface of what we can do with it. So, and people, I know there's a lot of people that do this. They don't talk about it because I think in some ways they think, oh, it's a big secret, and if I tell everyone about it, they'll all start doing it as well. But I'm sure that a lot of best-selling authors, as an example, tap into this, whether they know it or they don't know it consciously. It just fascinates me, because you're right, it's so much bigger than what we can understand. We're not even scratching the surface on the power of imagination. And yeah, so become the programmer of your imagination, and get a good night's sleep as well, which helps.
Yeah,
absolutely brilliant. Excellent. Well, listen, thank you so much, folks. Listen to the extended. May you have many downloads. May your writing flow, and hopefully one day. Now, let's just put this out into the world. Maybe one day you'll come on this podcast to talk to me and Mark about this particular episode that you heard, and you tapped into something that we talked about or that Jessie mentioned, and you can tell us a story of where that took your career. That will be an episode I'd like to listen to for sure. So, folks, thank you for joining us in the extended. If you missed it, you missed a whole load of really interesting discussions. We went all around the world.
Went
back.
deep.
And deep. Yeah,
deep,
the extended editionals are really deep, aren't they? Really deep. I love it. Yeah. But talking of celebrations and wins, Mark, there's a lot going on with the 200 words a day in May this week.
Loads of people. The hashtag 200 words a day, and we're challenging people to do 200 words a day just in the month of May. First one is Alyssa Eakins, 303 words on this first day of the May 200 words a day challenge. I'm terrible about writing every single day, so this will be fun. Bring it on. Bring it on indeed, Alyssa. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Good luck to you. Inkborn Blade, day 1 of 200 words a day in May, and day 455 of my streak. Wow. So 50 minutes equals 500 words of edits on my short story appearing later this month. That's all I can tell you for now. And then we've got Phil Oddie as well, wrote 363 words a day, in which nothing really happened, but you could cut the tension with a knife. So, folks, if you want to write every day in May, join these good people. Get that writing habit. It's all we're asking. It's just 200. This isn't, like other challenges where you're having to write thousands of words every day. Just 200 words. 200 words a day. Hashtag write every day in May. Hashtag 200 words a day. Go for it.
Brilliant. Yeah, and actually, if you want to sign up, very simple. Go to 200wordchallenge.com.
Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And if you want to get in touch with us on social media, we're Facebook Bestseller Experiment. Twitter and Instagram is @BestsellerXP. Or drop us a line directly. If you go to bestsellerexperiment.com, there's a contact tab there. Drop us an email.
Excellent stuff. Join the newsletter, folks. If you want to get a weekly newsletter about our latest episode, everything we've learned and everything you can learn from it, go along to bestsellerexperiment.com, click on the newsletter tab, pop your email address in there, and we'll make sure to include you in the list. And like Mark said earlier, if you're interested in joining the Academy, pop along. We're taking on a few new people, so pop along this week onto the academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. Mr. Stay, I hope you have a great week.
Yeah, should be fun. See you in Margate, folks, if you're around.
Pop along and chat. Really, it's always fun meeting listeners to the podcast. I feel quite lonely out here in Canada. I need to do something over in the West Coast maybe at some point.
Yeah.
But I love hearing all the stories of all the people that meet up. And thank you so much for listening to this podcast. We absolutely appreciate you, and for breaking through with your writing this week, folks. What is the one thing you're going to do to help you break through on the biggest challenge you've got with your writing? So on that note, it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2.
Goodbye.